the ancient Zen secret to letting go of everyone else's expectations. Perhaps you lie here tonight with a subtle ache vibrating behind your ribs, the quiet residue of a day spent trying to keep everyone around you at ease. Maybe your mind keeps rewinding a brief interaction, checking every spoken word to see if you caused a slight disappointment or left an uncomfortable silence behind. It is exhausting to live as the caretaker of everyone else's weather. You pull your personal boundaries tight, hoping to absorb every potential conflict before it ever reaches the people you care about. When a message sits unread, your stomach tightens with an instinct that you have failed someone. When someone grows cold or distant, you immediately search your own actions, asking what you did wrong and how you might fix it. This hypervigilance does not come from pride or malice. It comes from a deeply tender place that simply wants to ensure safety for everyone in the room. You have carried this unspoken responsibility for so long that you may no longer know how to exist without adjusting your pitch to suit the room. Around you now, the room is settling into the dark. The noise of the outside world has faded into a low, distant murmur. The temperature of the air rests gently against your skin. You might feel the soft weight of your mattress supporting the small of your back, holding you without asking for anything in return. There is a quiet cedar scent lingering in the quiet night air, mixing with the damp coolness creeping in from the window glass. The room does not require you to perform. The dark space around your bed asks for no explanations, no polished answers, and no carefully crafted peace offerings. You do not need to host anyone here. Tonight, you are allowed to stop tuning yourself for the comfort of others. You are not broken because you carry this heavy habit of pleasing. Your exhausted heart is not a defect that needs harsh fixing. You have simply stretched your inner instrument beyond its natural limits, winding every peg higher and higher until the wood itself begins to groan. Tonight, no one will demand that you make music. Nothing inside you needs to be forced or forcibly altered before you fall asleep. We are not here to repair your entire life in these quiet hours. We are only here to let the tension ease back down toward natural ground. Consider a surprising truth that ancient Buddhist wisdom offers to a tired mind. The deepest suffering in your chest does not come from the fact that other people sometimes feel disappointed. Disappointment is merely a natural weather pattern passing through another person's mind, a temporary rain that belongs entirely to them. Your true exhaustion comes from holding a rigid self-image that demands you must never be the cause of that rain. You have convinced yourself that your worth depends on being infinitely adaptable, eternally patient, and endlessly soft. You believe that if you ever drop the weight or say a firm no, the space around you will collapse into chaos. Yet, Buddhist insight reminds us of non-self, the truth that you are not a fixed hero required to save every heart from its own discomfort. When you try to control how others perceive you, you are attempting to rule the wind. You are stretching a silk string tighter than it was ever designed to go, hoping that if it sounds high enough, no one will ever turn away. But an instrument held at maximum tension cannot make a sweet sound for long. Eventually, the wood warps, and the music becomes strained, thin, and brittle. Maybe you have felt this precise strain in your throat when you wanted to say no, but forced out a polite yes instead. Maybe you have felt that sharp contraction in your solar plexus when you took blame for a misunderstanding that was not yours to fix. You did this because in that moment, suffering through self-sacrifice felt safer than facing another person's brief irritation. The fear of being viewed as difficult or unkind drove you to over-tighten your own spirit. You chose to break your own quiet internal boundary so that someone else could remain comfortable. If it feels right, notice where that habit is living in your physical body at this very second. You do not have to move or change your posture to observe it. Simply bring a gentle, curious awareness to the muscles along the back of your neck. Notice the subtle tightness where your head meets your spine, or the quiet tension holding your jaw slightly closed. Observe the way your belly might be holding itself rigid, as if preparing for an unexpected demand from the dark. These physical sensations are not mistakes. They are the physical evidence of your loyalty to others, preserved over many years of hypervigilance. They are the overwound pegs of an instrument that has forgotten how to rest in open pitch. In a moment, we will listen to a very old story about a workshop beside a roaring river. But before we journey there, allow your breathing to lose its purposeful rhythm. You do not need to take deep, deliberate breaths to earn your rest tonight. The body knows how to breathe without your instruction. Let the inhale come when it wants to come, brief or long. Let the exhale leave through your lips or nose without any lingering effort. You are not on display. There is no audience sitting at the foot of your bed evaluating how deeply you relax. What if the peace you have been searching for does not require you to become a better version of yourself? What if true relief arrives when you stop trying to manage the emotional climate of the world around you? Tonight, we are going to explore what happens when an overstretched heart finally allows its string to drop an octave. You do not need to solve your relationships before morning. You do not need to write apologies or draft boundaries in your head while lying in the dark. And this is where the mind begins to soften. The story we are about to enter will show us a quieter way of existing, a way that does not demand that you destroy your own instrument just to keep the surrounding valley entertained. Let your eyes grow heavy against the dim light of your room. Let your shoulders sink half an inch lower into the softness beneath you. Nothing is asking for your effort now. The night is wide, cold and quiet, and your only task is to listen as the wood of your heart gently uncurls from the heat of the day. High above the lower valleys, where the mountain mist hangs heavy among wet mountain cedars, there stood a modest timber workshop. The air inside always smelled of shaved resin, damp earth, and linseed oil, a constant. Low thunder echoed through the floorboards, coming from a powerful river gorge that sliced through the rock just beyond the eastern wall. In this quiet sanctuary lived an aging artisan named Master Kalen. He had spent 40 years carving long zithers from cured paulownia wood, shaping soundboards that could catch the subtlest movement of air. Sitting at his long work table was a young musician named Ren. Ren had come to the gorge seeking to master the zither, but a heavy shadow had fallen over his playing. In the village downstream, villagers often gathered in open pavilions near the water. The roaring gorge made it difficult for delicate music to carry over the foam. Whenever Ren played for the townspeople, he noticed their eyes wandering toward the white water. He saw their restless shifts, their quiet sighs, and their turned shoulders. A cold knot of fear had formed in Ren's stomach. He believed that if his music could not drown out the river, he was failing everyone who came to listen. He thought it was his absolute duty to keep their minds entertained, peaceful, and content. To overcome the river, Ren began changing his instrument. Late into the cold nights, while the workshop slept, he sat under the dim glow of an oil lamp with a wooden tuning key. He turned the bronze pegs tighter and tighter. He replaced his traditional silk strings with extra thick, tightly spun cords made of raw woven silk. He pulled them so taut that they vibrated at a shrill, piercing pitch. His fingers grew raw and calloused from plucking the rigid lines. When he played, the notes cut through the air like thin blades, forced and sharp. Master Kalen observed the young man in silence. For many weeks he watched Ren polish the wood until his arms burned, constantly adjusting the tuning pegs before every single phrase. Ren's posture was rigid, his shoulders raised high toward his ears, his teeth ground together in constant concentration. The joy of playing had completely vanished from his eyes, replaced by a desperate, hyper-vigilant strain. One damp evening, as the rain turned the mountain paths into slick gray mud, Ren sat down to practice a slow evening melody. The gorge outside was swollen with rain, roaring louder than usual. Ren took his wooden key and began turning the peg for the highest silk string. He wanted the note to pierce through the thunder of the water. He turned the peg 1/4 turn. The wood gave a quiet, strained creak. He turned it another fraction, his knuckles turning white in the lamplight. Master Kalen stood nearby, holding a small pot of warm linseed oil. He did not yell, nor did he rush forward to grab the key. He simply stood beside the work table, his eyes dark and steady. Ren gave the peg one final forceful twist. A high, unnatural pitch rang out, thin and desperate. Then, with a sudden, violent crack, the silk string snapped in two. The loose end whipped across the dark wood soundboard, leaving a pale white scratch across the varnish. The severed string coiled back on itself, limp, frayed, and useless upon the table. Ren dropped the tuning key onto the floorboards. He buried his face in his cold hands, his chest heaving with silent, bitter defeat. He felt he had proven his own inadequacy once again. He had broken the very tool given to him, all because he could not make a sound strong enough to satisfy the valley. Master Kalen set his oil pot down upon the wood. He did not offer immediate words of comfort, nor did he scold the young man for the ruined silk. Instead, he reached into a shallow wicker tray and pulled out a fresh, unstrung silk thread. It was pale cream, soft, and completely supple in his weathered palm. He laid the loose thread across Ren's open hand. "Feel the thread, Master," Kalen said softly, his voice low and steady like the mountain rock. Ren looked down at the soft coil resting on his skin. It had no tension. It made no sound at all. "You believe this silk string exists only to fight the river," Kalen murmured, setting a fresh wooden bridge upon the zither board. "You believe that if a listener turns away, or if the water rises, you must pull yourself tighter to bridge the gap. You have turned an instrument of harmony into a battlefield of willpower." Ren wiped his brow, his voice trembling slightly. "But if I do not tune it high enough to be heard over the gorge, the villagers will walk away disappointed. The music will be lost in the noise. I am responsible for bringing them peace." Master Kalen picked up the wooden tuning key from the floor. He threaded the new silk string through the tailpiece and brought it up across the dark plum wood bridge. He began to turn the peg, but he stopped the moment he felt a gentle, natural resistance. The string was pulled straight, but it retained a subtle, elastic give beneath his thumb. He plucked it softly. The note that rose was deep, round, and warm. It did not try to cut through the sound of the roaring gorge. Instead, it floated within the noise, distinct yet completely unhurried. "Look closely at the soundboard," Kalen whispered, pointing a thumb toward the pale scratch left by the snapped cord. Ren leaned in closer under the amber light of the oil lamp. He saw that the damage was not merely on the silk. Right beneath where the peg had been overwound, the cedar wood itself had developed a tiny hairline fissure. The body of the zither had buckled under the immense strain, long before the string actually broke. In trying to project a voice that could master the valley, the instrument had begun to destroy its own heart from within. "The river does not ask your zither to master it," Master Kalen said gently, laying his broad hand over the soundboard to silence the vibration. "And the villagers do not need you to conquer the air for them. When you stretch yourself beyond your natural pitch just to prevent their silence, you offer them only your panic disguised as art." Ren sat in the dim workshop, staring at the small hairline crack in the wood. A cold wave of recognition washed through his chest, hitting him with the force of the river outside. He realized he had been living his entire life like that overwound silk thread, in his family, among his friends, and in every room he had ever entered. He had constantly tightened his own mind. He had been adjusting his tone, his energy, and his desires, desperately trying to drown out every potential conflict before it could touch the people he loved. He had believed that his strain was proof of his love. Now he saw the truth etched into the ruined varnish. His endless effort was not saving anyone. It was simply cracking his own foundation. Master Kalen stood up and walked toward the window, looking out into the misty darkness where the river raged on, indifferent to the workshop and its sound. He left the zither sitting on the table, half-strung and silent. In a moment, this story will show us something even quieter about the hidden weight we carry in our own minds. Ren sat alone with the wooden zither, feeling the cool mountain draft sweep across his calloused fingers. The air was damp and heavy with the scent of cedar shavings. The river outside continued its endless roaring descent through the dark canyon, untouched by the broken string, completely untamed by human hands. For the first time in his life, Ren did not pick up the tuning key to fix it. He simply let his hands rest flat against the cool, quiet wood, allowing the soundboard to remain still in the dark. This ancient story is not an invitation to turn away from the people you love. It is not asking you to shut your heart, grow indifferent, or build a cold, distant wall around your daily life. Buddhist wisdom never asks us to become hollow, unfeeling stone. True spiritual maturity does not look like a musician throwing away their zither or refusing to play a song ever again. Rather, it gently directs our attention to the subtle, unnoticed way we twist our own tuning pegs when we feel afraid. Consider how we process our daily relationships. When someone we care about experiences disappointment, sadness, or a sudden flash of frustration, a natural event has taken place in the room. That person's emotional state is like the rising water in the canyon, a temporary surge born of its own distant storms, moving through its own natural cycle. The primary event is simply their discomfort, but the mind that fears failing others immediately steps into the room and performs an extra, invisible action. It grabs the wooden key and cranks its own internal tension higher, convincing itself that it must personally compensate for the storm. We tell ourselves a quiet lie. We believe that if we just hold our breath long enough, adjust our words carefully enough, and stay vigilant enough, we can prevent the rain from falling on anyone else's roof. This desperate grip on how others feel is what ancient teachings refer to as deep attachment. It is not love itself, but rather the fearful grip that hitches our safety to someone else's emotional climate. We crave the security of guaranteed approval, believing that if everyone around us is completely pleased, only then are we safe enough to rest our own bones. Think of how much energy is consumed by this constant inner tightening. Every time you anticipate a conflict and bend your true feelings to avoid it, you are stretching a delicate silk cord past its natural point of tolerance. The initial discomfort of another person's bad mood is merely a quiet sound in the night, but the secondary strain, the violent pulling of your own spirit to drown out that sound, is where your deep exhaustion is born. You are adding a heavy, self-inflicted wound to a simple passing moment. The Buddha pointed out that human suffering multiplies when we refuse to let reality exist as it is. We fight against the natural changes in those around us. We treat another person's shift in mood as an urgent crisis that we are personally required to solve. But people, much like the seasons, will inevitably have days of sun and days of heavy fog. Their internal weather is constantly shifting, changing, and dissolving under the influence of things you can neither see nor control. When you insist that their weather must remain bright so that you can feel worthy, you are trying to force a wooden soundboard to play a pitch it was never carved to make. Mindfulness in this soft light is not a complicated technique or a rigid mental exercise. It is simply the gentle ability to notice the hand reaching for the tuning key. It is the sudden, quiet awareness that says, "My neck is tight right now because I am trying to fix something that does not belong to me." It is recognizing that the urge to please is actually a habit of protection, a desperate attempt to keep your own world from shaking. When you see this pattern clearly, without judging yourself for having it, the grip on the wooden peg naturally begins to loosen. Releasing this grip does not mean you abandon your kindness. Releasing the grip means you stop using your kindness as a shield to protect yourself from being disliked. There is a vast, beautiful difference between offering a warm cup of tea out of genuine care and offering it because you are afraid of the quiet space between words. The first comes from a broad, relaxed chest. The second comes from a cord stretched so tight it is ready to snap at the slightest touch. When you allow the silk to return to its natural pitch, you are practicing true compassion for yourself and for others. You are acknowledging that the people in your life are strong enough to carry their own emotions. You are granting them the dignity of their own grief, their own frustration, and their own silence. You stop treating them as fragile creatures who will break if you do not constantly entertain or protect them. And in doing so, you finally step out of the exhausting role of being the master of everyone else's peace. Notice what happens in your chest when you entertain the thought that you do not have to manage the emotional climate of the world tonight. A subtle shift occurs when you realize that someone else's temporary disappointment does not make you a failure. It simply means a moment occurred that did not match their expectations. That is all. The soundboard of your heart does not need to crack itself in half trying to rewrite the narrative for them. Let this understanding sink slowly down into the dark room where you lie. The noise of expectations, both real and imagined, can remain outside your door like the distant rumble of the mountain gorge. You do not need to build a higher wall to block it out, and you do not need to sing over it. You can simply allow the noise to be as loud as it needs to be, while your own wooden frame rests quietly on the table. Now let this wisdom come closer to your own life. entering the places where you hold your own private tension. Think of the conversations you have carried in your head today, the small moments where you felt you fell short of what someone wanted. Notice how your mind kept going back to those moments, picking up the wooden key and trying to turn the event over and over to find a better outcome. That endless replaying is the mind's habit of trying to rewrite a song that has already been played. But the note has already dissolved into the air. Holding the instrument in a vice grip now will not change the sound that left the string an hour ago. The art of inner peace begins when you grant the past permission to remain exactly as it happened, without demanding that you go back and fix it. You can acknowledge that a moment was uncomfortable, awkward, or tense, without turning that tension into your permanent home. You can let the silk lie loose across the wood, knowing that an unstrung instrument is not ruined, but merely resting between songs. As the quiet hours of the night grow deeper, allow yourself to feel the natural space around your body. The bed holds you without demanding that you adjust your weight. The dark room encloses you without asking you to shine. Everything in this space is content to let you be exactly as you are, with all your unfinished thoughts and unfulfilled promises. There is nothing to repair before the sun comes up. In a moment, we will move from these quiet reflections into a soft, internal practice that allows the body to feel this release directly. You will not need to perform any difficult steps or achieve a special state of mind. We will simply learn how to locate the overwound pegs inside our own physical frame and gently allow them to back down toward natural silence. Allow your breath to remain light and unforced, coming and leaving like a soft draft through an open cedar shutter. The mountain workshop is quiet now. The oil lamps have been extinguished, and the cool night air is settling over the unstrung woods. You are safe enough in this dark room to let your own instrument go silent, trusting that the world will continue to turn even if you do not play a single note tonight. If it feels comfortable right now, allow your physical form to sink just a small fraction deeper into whatever surface is beneath you. There is no special way you need to sit or lie down. You do not need to sit upright or fix your spine into a rigid posture. Your body has been performing for others all through the daylight hours, holding itself ready, alert, and responsive. Now, in this dark room, you can let your frame become heavy and soft like unworked cedar resting on a cool stone floor. Perhaps bring a very subtle, soft attention to the breath as it enters your body. You do not need to take a sudden, deep breath or count the seconds of your exhale. Simply notice the small wave of air moving through the back of your nose. Feel the quiet warmth spreading into your chest as the air arrives. Notice how your belly gently rises, pushing slightly against your clothing or blanket, and then watch it sink back down on its own. The breath knows its own depth. It does not need you to manage its tempo tonight. As you lie here, you might notice where your body is still holding on to the day. Perhaps there is a slight tightness in your temples, a subtle clenching around your jaw, or a heavy sensation sitting right across your collarbones. These soft physical knots are simply where your hypervigilance has gathered. They are the spots where you have been turning the tuning pegs inside yourself, trying to maintain a pitch that would keep the room around you peaceful. There is no need to fight those feelings or force them to disappear. Even simply noticing that they are present is more than enough for right now. Now, if it feels right, bring to your mind one specific worry that has been hovering near you today. Perhaps it is a conversation that ended on an uncertain note. Maybe it is a small request you wanted to decline, but ended up accepting out of fear of disappointing someone. Or perhaps it is a general, heavy feeling that you are constantly running behind, failing to meet the silent expectations of the people in your life. Do not lean into the details of the story. You do not need to analyze who was right or what you should have said. Simply take that single knot of worry, that familiar urge to please and perform, and name it quietly to yourself. You might simply whisper the words, over-tightened string, or pleasing habit, acknowledging that this emotional pattern is present in your heart tonight. Imagine, in the quiet theater of your mind, the inner architecture of a wooden zither lying upon a smooth workbench. See the long, dark Paulownia soundboard, polished with linseed oil, cool and broad in the soft twilight. At one end of the instrument, picture the carved wooden tuning pegs, turned so tight that the silk cords above them are humming with a rigid, strained energy. Now, mentally take that single worry, that heavy fear of letting someone down, and imagine placing it gently into one of those taut silk cords. See the cord vibrating at a sharp, unnatural pitch under the weight of that expectation. Notice how hard the line is pulling against the wood soundboard beneath it, stretching the wood until it aches. If you feel ready, picture a gentle hand reaching toward that specific wooden peg. There is no sudden jerk or violent movement. The hand simply rests against the peg and slowly counter-rotates it, turning the wood counterclockwise, just a few millimeters at a time. Feel what happens as the peg turns back toward its natural origin. The high, piercing pitch of the silk cord begins to drop. The sound descends from a sharp, forced note down into a warm, resonant tone. As the peg continues to loosen, the high vibration dies away completely. The silk cord relaxes, losing its rigid edge, coming to rest gently across the dark plum wood bridge. Notice the soundboard beneath the string. As the tension evaporates from the cord, the cedar wood stops groaning under the strain. The subtle hairline pressure inside the wood soundboard opens up, expands, and settles. The wood takes a deep, quiet breath of its own. Perhaps you can feel a similar unwinding taking place inside your own chest right now. As that mental peg turns, feel the muscles around your ribs expanding sideways. Feel the tightness in your throat dropping its pitch, tone by tone, dropping down from anxiety into quiet ground space. You are not snapping the thread, and you are not abandoning the instrument. You are simply allowing the cord to go slack, removing the forced tension so the wood can remember its natural strength. If your mind tries to grab the key and tighten the peg again, that is completely natural. The habit of hypervigilance has kept you safe for a very long time, and it does not disappear in a single night. When you notice the mind reaching out to retighten the worry, simply greet it with a soft, forgiving curiosity. You might tell yourself, the peg is allowed to rest unstrung tonight. No one is asking for a song in the dark. Let the mental picture of the workshop fade into the background now. Bring your awareness back to the physical room where you are lying. Feel the cool air against your cheeks. Listen to the small, subtle sounds of your home as it cools and settles in the night. Your body is resting on the mattress, completely supported, entirely safe from any demands or evaluations. You do not need to feel completely healed right now. Spiritual transformation is not a forced transformation, and it is not a performance you must complete before you are allowed to sleep. If a lingering trace of anxiety remains in your stomach, allow it to sit there beside you like an unstrung cord on the table. It does not mean you have failed this practice. It simply means your heart has been caring very deeply for a long time, and it needs a little space to learn how to rest. Every breath you take without effort is a gentle reminder that you are allowed to exist without earning your place in the room. You do not need to prove your kindness by breaking your own soundboard. You do not need to hold up the sky for others while your own ground crumbles beneath you. Allow your awareness to drift freely now, floating like a single dry leaf settling onto the surface of a quiet mountain pool. The water does not ask the leaf to swim or sing. The water simply receives the weight of the leaf and holds it still. And as the night deepens around you, the teaching begins to take root in a deeper layer of your awareness, preparing to show us what happens when we let go of the need to control the outcome of our lives. Let your shoulders stay low. Let your tongue rest flat and heavy behind your lower teeth, and simply exist here, in this quiet, unstrung space where nothing is required of you. 3 autumns passed before Ren walked up the moss-covered steps of the high mountain pavilion. The valley below was veiled in thick gray mist, and a slow, persistent rain drummed against the broad terracotta roof tiles. Ren had traveled far since leaving Master Kalen's workshop, but the shadow of his old habits still followed him like an unwanted companion. Whenever he entered a new temple or village, he felt the familiar, nervous tightening in his neck, the instant instinct to scan every face, to measure the mood of every room, and to bend his spirit until everyone around him felt comfortable. In this secluded pavilion lived an elder nun named Sister May. She was known across the ridge not as a performer or a scholar, but as a keeper of temple sounds. Her task was simple. She maintained the ancient instruments that gathered moisture in the mountain air. ensuring their woods did not rot or split under the damp weather. When Ren arrived, he found Sister May kneeling on the wet stone porch beside an ancient zither soundboard. The instrument was very old, dark with age, and missing almost all its strings. At the center of its face sat a curved bridge carved from dark plum wood. The bridge was heavily warped, bowed out of shape by decades of holding immense tension against the wood. Because of its distortion, no new string could sit flat upon it without slipping off into silence. Ren knelt beside the porch, the smell of rain mixing with cold stone and soaked moss. He watched Sister May handle the dark plum wood bridge with immense, slow care. "Sister May," Ren said quietly, his voice carrying the familiar edge of an unsolved burden. "The wood is crooked. It has held tension for so long that its very shape has turned into a distortion. Should we throw it into the hearth fire and carve a fresh bridge from new pine?" Sister May did not answer immediately. She picked up a small iron chisel, cleared a sliver of damp lichen from the edge of the porch, and set the tool down. She looked out at the rain falling steadily into a granite basin in the courtyard below. "When wood is subjected to unrelenting force," she murmured, her voice soft and dry like rustling autumn leaves, "it does not warp because it is wicked or flawed. It warps because it was trying very hard to hold something heavy without breaking. To burn it now would be to punish the wood for its loyalty to the strain." Ren looked down at the dark plum wood. He felt a sharp, painful ache bloom behind his breastbone. He recognized that warped bridge. It was his own heart, bent out of shape by years of trying to carry the emotional equilibrium of everyone he had ever loved. He had spent his entire youth believing that if he stopped accommodating others, if he ever allowed a bridge to crack or fail, he would be cast aside as useless. "Then how do we restore it?" Ren asked, leaning forward as the mountain chill seeped through his damp woolen sleeves. "How do we make it straight enough to hold a melody again?" Sister May reached into a shallow stoneware tub sitting beside her knee. The tub was filled with cool, dark river silt, gathered from the slow bend where the mountain stream flattened out. She took the warped plum wood bridge and placed it deep inside the wet silt, pressing the mud over its dark grain until it was completely buried beneath the dark earth. "We do not force it back with a hammer," Sister May said, wiping her mud-stained palms on her apron. "We do not apply more heat or pull it from the other side to cancel out the old twist. Force only creates fresh fractures inside the grain. Instead, we let it sit in the damp earth without any strings, without any pressure, without any job to perform. We let the wood absorb moisture until its fibers forget the shape of the strain." Ren sat on the cold stone floor for hours as the afternoon turned into dusk. The rain continued its steady rhythm against the terracotta tiles, dripping off the carved eaves in long silvery threads. Sister May did not offer him speeches or grand philosophies. She simply sat near the charcoal brazier, sipping lukewarm tea, allowing the rain and the silence to fill the pavilion. Ren's mind, accustomed to constant activity, began its old pattern of panic. He thought of the village below, where people were waiting for news from the upper sanctuary. He thought of his companions who might be judging his long absence. His shoulders began to creep toward his ears. His breath grew short and shallow. Every cell in his body urged him to stand up, grab a tool, do something useful, and prove his worth to the silent nun sitting beside him. He reached out his hand toward the stoneware tub, wanting to dig the plum wood bridge out of the mud, to check if it was straightening, to verify that the process was working. Sister May raised a quiet hand, not in anger, but in a gesture as light as a falling leaf. "Let the mud do its work in the dark," she whispered softly. Ren froze. His hand hovered over the cool stoneware rim. In that single suspended second, a profound choice opened before him. He could give in to the old panic, dig up the wood, and force an answer before its time. Or he could sit back, lower his arm, and allow the uncertainty to exist in the room without fixing it. Slowly, deliberately, Ren drew his breath all the way down into his lower belly. He let his ribcage expand against his belt. He felt the cold air entering his nostrils, sharp and wet with rain. He let his arm drop back onto his knee. He did not achieve a sudden, magical enlightenment. He did not instantly shed all his anxieties or become a saint of perfect peace. But for the very first time in his life, he refrained from acting on the urgent voice of his hypervigilance. He allowed the plum wood bridge to remain hidden, wet, and completely silent in the mud. He looked out into the dimming courtyard where rain filled the granite basin to its brim. The basin did not try to hold the water back, nor did it try to push the rain away. It simply allowed the water to flow in and spill over its smooth stone lips onto the moss below, unburdened by the need to contain the storm. A quiet realization settled over Ren's mind like the evening fog. He saw that transformation was not about becoming a perfect musician who never felt afraid of disappointing others. Transformation was simply the willingness to pause for one breath before reacting to the fear. It was the decision to let his heart rest in the quiet silt of non-action, even when the mind screamed that everything was falling apart. Sister May looked over at him in the fading light, her aged face softening into a faint, knowing smile. She did not praise him. She did not tell him he had passed a test. She simply poured a fresh cup of tea and set it near his resting knee, leaving the mountain rain to carry the rest of the night forward. When we look deeply at the architecture of our daily anxiety, we discover a hidden mechanism at work beneath the surface. It is the subtle, automatic belief that safety is something we must continuously manufacture through control. When we live with a constant fear of disappointing others, our mind functions like a vigilant guard, standing at the gates of a stone fortress. We rehearse future conversations in our thoughts before they ever happen, searching for the exact words that will prevent friction. We replay past encounters over and over, dissecting a casual remark or a shifted glance, looking for any clue that we might have caused offense. We tell ourselves that if we just analyze our behavior hard enough, we can protect ourselves from ever feeling the cold sting of someone else's disapproval. This pattern is not a flaw in your character. It is a defense mechanism built out of an ancient human desire to belong and be safe. But notice what happens inside your chest when this guard never leaves his post. The nervous system remains in a perpetual state of readiness. Treat every unexpected pause or neutral tone as an incoming threat. We begin to confuse our control habits with love. We convince ourselves that if we stop monitoring the reactions of those around us, everything will collapse into disorder. We become addicted to approval, treating a warm smile like oxygen and a cool silence like a sudden drop in pressure that demands immediate correction. When we cannot secure that constant approval, we often turn our frustration inward. We attempt to fix ourselves through shame. We tell ourselves that if we were only more patient, more charming, more capable, or more selfless, we would never make anyone feel uncomfortable. We use harsh inner criticism as a whip, believing that if we punish ourselves first, we can somehow prevent others from judging us. Over time, this self-judgment becomes so familiar that we build an entire identity around it. We begin to think of ourselves as the one who must always adjust, the one who carries the heavy load, the one whose feelings must always take second place to the comfort of the group. Buddhist wisdom brings a clear, clarifying light to this internal struggle. It asks us to look at the crucial difference between the original impact of life and the secondary burden we create inside our own minds. In life, friction is inevitable. Someone will eventually disagree with you. A friend will have a bad day and speak sharply. An employer will hold an expectation you cannot meet without exhausting your health. These moments are like a sudden gust of mountain wind striking an open instrument soundboard. The wind blows across the wood, creating a sharp, unexpected vibration. That initial vibration is merely the world touching you. It is the simple, natural occurrence of two different lives crossing paths in an unpredictable world. The secondary burden arrives when we grab the wooden tuning key and refuse to let that natural vibration pass through us. Instead of allowing the sound to rise and fall, our mind locks itself around the note. We say to ourselves, "This friction should not be happening. I must have played the wrong pitch. I must fix this sound immediately, or I am ruined." We take a momentary breeze and turn it into a permanent structural war within the wood. We add layers of anxiety, guilt, and frantic performance on top of a simple passing event. Think of a zither resting on a wooden table during a rainstorm. The rain falls on the roof tiles above, and the floorboards carry a quiet, low tremor from the thunder outside. The soundboard of the zither does not choose whether to feel that tremor. The wood naturally receives the vibration of the storm because it is resonant, open, and alive. But the soundboard does not grip the tremor. It does not try to transform the thunder into a sweet lullaby, nor does it punish itself for echoing the deep rumble of the sky. The vibration moves through the cellular grain of the wood, resonates for a moment, and then quietly dissolves back into the still air of the room. Peace does not come from creating a room where no thunder ever sounds. True peace arrives when the wood realizes it does not need to turn every external tremor into a personal crisis. The initial pain, the unexpected friction or disappointment from another person, is simply a weather pattern moving through the environment. Your suffering only begins when you insist that your soundboard must remain completely silent, or that you must somehow bend your entire shape to absorb the thunder for everyone else in the building. When you stop trying to control how the wind blows across your instrument, a profound quiet opens up inside your mind. You begin to see that uncertainty is not an enemy to be defeated. Uncertainty is simply the spacious, open air in which all music lives. When you do not know exactly how someone feels about you, you do not need to rush in and fill the silence with endless reassurances seeking or self-correction. You can allow the space between you to remain open, like a silent courtyard after the rain, without needing to control what walks through the gate next. This shift in perspective requires a gentle form of courage. It requires us to sit with the uncomfortable sensation of another person's quiet mood without jumping up to fix it. It means allowing someone to feel their own disappointment, without treating their emotion as a verdict on your personal worth. You begin to understand that their disappointment belongs to their own inner landscape, shaped by their history, their desires, and their expectations. You are not the author of their internal weather, and you do not possess the power to guarantee their eternal sunshine. When you release this impossible burden, you are not becoming cold or heartless. You are stepping into a far deeper, more authentic form of presence. When you are no longer terrified of disappointing people, you can finally offer them a genuine, unforced kindness. Your yes becomes a real, solid gift, rather than a reluctant concession born of fear. Your no becomes a clear, respectful boundary that protects the integrity of your instrument, ensuring that when you do choose to play, the sound you make is clean, true, and resonant. Notice how your mind feels when you let go of the need to fix yourself tonight. The habit of self-judgment may tell you that you still have so much work to do, that you must master these teachings before you can truly rest. But that voice is just the old tuning key, trying to turn the peg once more under the guise of spiritual progress. You do not need to become a perfect master of letting go. You only need to notice the urge to control, and pause for one single breath before you act on it. Allow that pause to stretch out into the darkness of your room right now. Let the story of who you ought to be dissolve into the quiet air. Your life does not need to be a finished masterpiece before you are allowed to close your eyes. The unstrung wood of your heart is already whole, already complete, sitting safely in the dark without a single note left to play. As the night continues to settle, we can begin to see how this gentle truth touches the small, ordinary moments of our daily lives, transforming the way we walk through the world when the morning light arrives. But for now, let the weight of your thoughts grow light, floating like thin smoke rising from a dying ember, vanishing into the wide, unburdened expanse of the night. Consider how this subtle internal tightening reveals itself in the quiet, mundane scenes of your modern week. You sit at a desk or hold a phone in the dim light of an afternoon, waiting for a reply to a message you sent hours ago. When the screen remains dark, a cold, familiar instinct stirs in your abdomen. Your mind immediately begins to turn the tuning key, rereading your own words with critical eyes, searching for a phrase that might have sounded too blunt, too needy, or slightly out of tune. You pick up the device again, seeking a quick reassurance that will settle the high, nervous hum in your throat. In that brief moment, your peace is held hostage by a small, glowing box, as if your worth as a human being depended on keeping every digital conversation perfectly harmonious. Or think of those public moments when you force a polite, warm smile while a heavy stone sits in the pit of your stomach. Someone asks how you are doing, and your mouth answers with practiced lightness, even as your spirit feels entirely depleted. You do this because you carry an invisible contract that says your internal weather must never inconvenience the room. You believe that showing fatigue, sadness, or a firm boundary will make you a burden to those around you. You spend immense energy polishing your outer appearance, acting as the reliable caretaker, while the soundboard beneath your surface develops quiet, hidden cracks from the strain of holding up everyone else's comfort. Notice too how guilt arrives the very second you try to lie down and rest. When you attempt to pause, an anxious voice inside your head begins to list everything you have left undone, every email awaiting an answer, every person you might have neglected, every goal you have not yet achieved. You feel as though rest is a prize you must earn through complete exhaustion, rather than a natural law of your existence. You compare your quiet, messy life to the curated highlights of strangers, convincing yourself that you are falling behind in a race that exists only inside your own imagination. The wisdom of the unstrung instrument does not ask you to change your entire life overnight, nor does it demand that you throw away your phone or abandon your daily duties. It invites you to practice a soft, quiet spaciousness inside the very moments that used to trigger your panic. When you feel the familiar urge to check your screen for validation, you can choose to pause for one full, unhurried breath. You do not have to put the phone down forever. You simply offer yourself a few seconds of quiet space before your fingers react. In that brief pause, you can notice the overwound peg inside your chest and gently remind yourself that a delayed reply is not a verdict on your soul. Another person's silence is merely their own weather, a quiet space in their day that you are not required to fill with your anxiety. When a friend or family member expresses frustration or disappointment, you can learn to stand near their storm without absorbing their rain. You can offer a listening ear, a quiet cup of tea, or a warm hand, without tightening your own strings to match their high pitch. Caring deeply does not mean destroying your own soundboard to make someone else's music softer. You can love someone completely while allowing them the space to carry their own heavy feelings, trusting that they have the strength to weather their own internal seasons. If you find yourself needing to say no to a request that would push you past your limits, notice the immediate rise of fear in your throat. The old habit will urge you to offer long explanations, elaborate excuses, or breathless apologies to soften the blow. But wisdom invites you to deliver a simple, honest refusal with a calm, steady heart. A quiet boundary is not an act of hostility. It is the simple, necessary act of slacking a silk cord so that the wood beneath it does not snap. You are allowed to rest before you are completely broken. You do not need to earn your right to lie in the dark by first burning away every ounce of your vital energy. Just as a forest ground requires the cold, silent months of winter to replenish its soil, your spirit requires periods of total non-doing to preserve its resonance. Resting is not a betrayal of your responsibilities. It is the very foundation that allows your presence to remain genuine, soft, and clear when you return to the world. When your mind begins to replay an old mistake, reminding you of a moment where you spoke clumsily or failed to meet an expectation, you can notice that thought without obeying its command to suffer. A thought of regret is merely a passing cloud crossing the sky of your awareness. It is an old, habitual vibration moving through the air. You do not need to grab the wooden key and retighten your entire body around a moment that has already dissolved into the past. You can simply let the thought exist, observe its shape, and watch it fade away without giving it your vital energy. As you lie here tonight, consider how much lighter your days could feel if you stopped treating every person's mood as a test you must pass. Imagine walking into a room without the heavy duty of managing its emotional climate. Imagine speaking your truth without a lingering fear of being viewed as imperfect. You do not need to become a heroic savior for everyone you meet. It is more than enough to be an honest, quiet presence that knows its own limits and honors its own need for peace. Allow these practical truths to settle into your body like soft dew absorbing into dry wood. You are not required to master this art by tomorrow morning. Every small pause, every unforced breath, and every gentle boundary you set is a step toward unstringing the heavy burden you have carried for so long. The room around you remains dark, cool, and still. The night air moves softly through the space, carrying no expectations, no demands, and no performance reviews. You are entirely safe to drop the weight of your daily roles, letting the caretaker, the pleaser, and the performers step aside for the night. In a moment, we will allow all these words, stories, and ideas to dissolve completely into the deep quiet of rest. You will not need to remember any lesson or hold on to any technique. Everything you need to understand has already been received by the quietest part of your heart. Let your hands rest loose upon your bedding, feeling the cool fabric beneath your fingertips. Let your eyelids grow thick and heavy, closing out the last faint shapes of the room. The world outside will continue to turn. The wind will move through the valley trees, and the mountain streams will flow toward the distant sea, all without requiring a single moment of your effort or concern tonight. The rain on the terracotta tiles above Sister Mai's pavilion has slowed to a soft rhythmic drip. In the dark workshop, the scent of damp cedar, linseed oil, and wet river silt hangs still in the night air. The long Polonia soundboard lies flat upon the timber table, completely unstrung, broad and cold. The wooden tuning pegs are relaxed in their sockets. The silk cords lie loose in shallow wicker baskets, completely unbent, holding no pitch, carrying no strain, and making no sound. The instrument does not need to tune itself for the morning. It does not need to prepare a song for the valley. It rests in the deep, dark quiet of the mountain, entirely complete in its silence. Let your own physical form sink into that same unstrung stillness now. Feel the heavy, dense weight of your shoulders resting against your mattress. There is no posture you need to hold, and no shape you need to maintain for the dark room. Feel the back of your head sinking half an inch deeper into the pillow, supported without condition, held without effort. Your jaw softens, releasing its quiet grip. The tiny muscles around your eyes smooth out, abandoning the watchful posture of the day. Your breath becomes very quiet now, like a faint evening breeze moving through open cedar shutters. It comes and goes without your direction, light, shallow, and cool. Inhale coming in like soft mist over stone. Exhale leaving like rain slipping off a dark tile roof. You do not need to guide the air. You do not need to measure its depth. The body breathes itself, just as the mountain holds its quiet trees through the night. Every thought that floats through your awareness now is merely a loose silk thread resting on dark wood. You do not need to gather the threads. You do not need to attach them to pegs or pull them tight across a bridge. If a thought of tomorrow appears, let it lie loose upon the soundboard. If a memory of today passes by, let it fade back into the dark silt. Nothing requires your intervention. No one is standing at the door asking you to play. Feel the broad expanse of your chest rising and falling in the dark. Inside your ribs, the long, subtle tension of the day is dissolving tone by tone. The high, sharp pitch of hypervigilance drops into a warm, low resonance. The low resonance drops into a soft murmur. The murmur gently fades into open, silent space. Your heart bridge is resting deep in the damp earth, unburdened by the weight of expectations, absorbing the quiet moisture of the night, slowly forgetting the shape of the strain. There is nothing left to fix before morning. You do not need to solve your relationships tonight. You do not need to decide how to answer the world tomorrow. The world can wait outside your quiet pavilion, vast, dark, and unmanaged, turning on its own axis without your permission or help. You have permission to drop the wooden key from your hand. You have permission to let the instrument go entirely silent in the dark. Feel the heavy warmth spreading through your arms, moving down through your wrists, into the palms of your open hands. Your fingers curl inward naturally, completely relaxed, holding nothing, striving for nothing. Your legs grow long, heavy, and motionless, sinking like solid timber into the quiet depths of the bed. The darkness around you is soft, cool, and broad, wrapping your frame in a sanctuary where no performance is ever demanded. You are returning home to the quiet awareness that was always sitting beneath the noise. It is the wide, untroubled soundboard that remains undamaged even when the silk breaks. It is the deep, still ground that holds the river without becoming the foam. You do not need to earn this refuge. You do not need to prove your worth to belong to this quiet night. You are allowed to simply exist, unstrung, unburdened, and deeply at rest. As the quiet hours carry you forward, let every remaining word melt away into pure sensation. The subtle scent of rain on cold stone, the cool touch of night air against your skin, the quiet, effortless rhythm of your pulse slowing down, the deep, dark safety of a room that asks for nothing at all. Sink deeper now into the dark earth of sleep. Let your mind float down like a single loose thread, settling onto quiet water, drifting without direction, dissolving into the wide, silent sea of rest. What if the harmony you spent your whole life trying to create for others was already waiting inside the silence you were too tired to allow? Allow that single question to hang in the dark room, unhurried, unanswered, and completely free of urgency. You do not need to gather your thoughts to answer it. You do not need to analyze your past to understand its meaning. The question is not a riddle for your mind to solve. It is simply a soft key slipping into an old lock, opening a heavy door that you have been pushing against for years. Behind that door lies the wide, undisturbed silence that has been sitting beneath every song you ever tried to play. We often fear silence because we mistake it for emptiness. We think that if we are not producing a sweet sound, if we are not actively pleasing the people in our lives, we will become invisible or forgotten. But the silence inside your heart is not a void. It is the solid, dark earth in which the timber tree planted its roots long before it ever became a zither. It is the quiet riverbed that supports the rushing water without being swept away. Think of how much trust it takes for a tree to grow in the mountain forest. The tree does not force its sap to rise faster when a storm approaches. It does not tighten its bark to impress the mountain winds. It simply stands in the wet soil, allowing the seasons to move across its branches, shedding its leaves when autumn arrives, and resting under snow throughout the long winter months. The tree knows how to be still because it does not believe its existence is a performance. Tonight, you are being invited to remember that same quiet origin. You are not a performer standing on a stage under bright lights, waiting for an audience to decide if you are worthy of staying. You are the deep, quiet wood itself. You are the broad soundboard, carved with care, resting safely on the workbench in the dark. The soundboard does not lose its value when the music stops. Its true nature remains whole, resonant, and completely unblemished, even when no fingers touch its silk cords. Feel how your body responds when you grant yourself permission to exist without a purpose tonight. Notice the subtle release in the small of your back, where the muscles have been bracing against unseen burdens. Feel the heavy softness in your thighs and calves, sinking down like damp logs settling into deep forest moss. Your feet lie quiet and cool beneath the covers, no longer required to carry you toward another task or another obligation. Your breathing moves like the softest tide, barely disturbing the stillness of the room. Inhale, receiving the cool night air without grabbing it. Exhale, releasing the warm air without holding on to its exit. There is no rhythm you need to maintain. There is no count you need to follow. The air enters because your body is open, and it leaves because your body is relaxed. You are being breathed by the world, effortlessly, continuously, without a single moment of conscious labor. If an old memory of a difficult moment wanders through your mind, notice how faint it has become in this dark space. The conversation that felt so sharp during the day is now just a distant shadow moving across a damp wall. The fear of having disappointed someone is merely a dry leaf scraping against stone outside your window. You can look at that leaf without stepping out into the cold to pick it up. You can let the wind carry it down the mountain path, out of sight, out of reach, completely beyond your concern. Imagine the high mountain pavilion once more, wrapped in the cool embrace of midnight rain. Sister May has set her teacup aside, and the charcoal brazier glows with a faint, warm amber light in the corner. The stoneware tub sits quietly on the porch, holding the warped plum wood bridge deep within its dark river silt. Underneath the mud, where no eyes can watch and no hands can interfere, the tight grain of the wood is slowly drinking the moisture. The ancient tension that twisted the fibers is quietly yielding, softening millimeter by millimeter, letting go of the memory of the strain. The wood does not struggle to straighten itself. It does not force its grain to shift. It simply sits in the cool earth and allows time and water to do what force could never accomplish. And when the morning comes or the next season arrives, the bridge will emerge soft, steady, and ready to hold a true pitch once again. Not because it was punished into shape, but because it was allowed to rest in the dark. Your heart is undergoing that same silent, hidden restoration right now. Every minute you spend lying here without fixing, without planning, and without pleasing, your spirit is soaking up the cool moisture of peace. The inner tightness that made you feel so brittle is slowly uncurling. The hairline pressure inside your chest is expanding into broad, open space. You are restoring your own instrument simply by choosing not to play it tonight. Let your mind grow thick and quiet like a heavy snowfall coming down on a silent cedar forest. The snow covers the high mountain paths, hiding the footprints of everywhere you have been today. It covers the distant village below, smoothing over every road, every rooftop, and every unfulfilled promise. Everything becomes soft, white, and still under the gentle weight of the falling snow. There is nowhere you need to travel tonight. There is no one you need to call, no message you need to send, and no explanation you need to prepare for tomorrow. When the sun rises, the world will present its new day, and you will meet it with whatever strength you have. But until that light touches your window, this night belongs entirely to your rest. You are allowed to turn your back on the demands of the world and step into the quiet sanctuary of your own heart. Feel the deep weight of sleep pulling at your limbs now, heavy, warm, and inviting. It is a soft wave rising from the floorboards, carrying you away from the shore of your thoughts. You do not need to hold on to the shore. You do not need to keep a foot on the solid ground of your identity. You can let go of your name, your history, your worries, and your roles. You can dissolve into the wide, unburdened ocean of sleep, trusting that the water will hold you safely until morning. The zither on the table is silent. The silk threads in the wicker basket are loose and soft. The mountain rain falls gently over the terracotta roof, washing away the dust of the day, leaving only the quiet fragrance of wet cedar and damp earth. You are safe. You are unstrung. You are entirely free to rest. Let your awareness sink down through the darkness, down past the sound of the rain, down past the movement of your breath, settling into the vast, motionless center of your being, where no note has ever been forced and no song has ever been lost.